Okay, in this video we're going to talk a little bit more about normal maps. And I'm going to make a normal map all the way through. We'll change it to local and tangent space, and then we'll kick it over to Max, and we'll finish it up over there. Here's the map that I'm going to start with. And it's just a rusty metal wall, like a corrugated garage door. I'm going to start by adjusting this image's saturation down to 0 saturation so I could see it a little bit better. And I'm also going to gray it out a little bit. And I think actually what I'm going to do is make a new layer. I can do this a number of ways. And we'll fill this layer with a medium gray. And it doesn't really matter which medium gray we fill it with, and we'll knock the fill amount down here to about half so we can see through the layers. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is make another new layer, and I'm going to carve out these indented areas in the wall. And I'm going to use a darker gray, not black. Try to stay away from blacks and whites because then you don't have any options to go higher or lower. And for this, I'm using a fuzzy brush here that's set to, if I find the one I'm using, let's use one of these. We don't want the trailing off feature like a Wacom tablet for this because I want it to be even. And I'm going to size my brush just big enough to fit into these little indented areas right there. So something like that, although I think I could probably use a slightly darker gray. There we go. And I'm just going to drag through these little indented areas, and we're just kind of carving out that space. There's another one down here. Okay, and then I'm going to make another new layer, and I'm going to carve out this little raised area here. And this gray should be pretty good. You always want to go from low to high, and then that way your higher areas are covering up the lower areas, which is probably what you want. Oops, misclicked there. There we go. So we've got those areas all carved out. Now the rest of this, these areas in between here, I'm going to go to a new layer for those. And I'm going to do them a little bit different, just to show you some different ways of doing this. You don't have to use a fuzzy brush all the time. In fact, if you want to use the blur feature, Gaussian blur, I think it actually works a little bit better. And what I'm going to do is turn these off, and I'm going to aim right here at these raised areas. So we're talking about this area right in here. And I'm going to use a hard-edged brush this time. Something like, how about this guy here? We're going to size it right into that area there, so it's pretty close. And I'm going to use my lighter gray because it's higher, and I'm just going to throw some gray into these areas here. I'm going almost to the edge of where I want this to be, right there. And I'll probably make that a little thicker. Now I can use a Gaussian blur on this, so I can go to blur, Gaussian blur, and what that's going to do is smooth the edges evenly so that I don't have to worry about the brush getting in the way and having uneven features. So that's going to give me a perfectly smooth transition, and you can see that if I throw in my other colors on top of it, I have most everything that I need there. I can then merge these down into each other, so all of them are in one layer, and I can apply that Gaussian blur on them again. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Blur, Gaussian blur. And we can just kind of blur them all together, so we'll end up with nice even transitions. Not happy with this area here though. fix this area up right down here. There we go. That'll work. Got a few little gaps in here that need to be filled up. There we go. And that'll get us pretty much what we need. I'm not too worried about the areas that are showing through. You'll see some areas here. That'll just add to the normal map. So now I've got to blend these layers together. What I'm going to do is go through my layer types here to see if I get any layer that will allow the details to show through from the layers below. Something like, in this case, lighten seems to be getting me something. And none of the others seem to be working. You can also play with your fill amounts, and I can knock the fill amount down. In this case, I think the fill amount is going to work better. And so between my gray layer and these stripes of gray that I've drawn in, I'm going to go with something like this. And I'm going to, well, before I flatten it, I want to do one more thing, though. I want to bend these bottom pieces up a little bit. So down here is going to be higher than here. And I'm going to do that using another feature. I'm going to use a light gray, and I'm just going to paint stripes right through here, because I want these little edges at the bottom to be slightly lighter. And then I'm going to go up to blur and use motion blur, and I'm going to set this at 90, and we're going to blur them up. And what that's going to do is it's going to make that a little bit of a gradient there, and then I can adjust my fill amount so that I have a slight gradient right there. That motion blur really works well for normal maps because you don't have to be very exact. You can just let Photoshop do all your gradients for you. I've seen this done with gradient maps, but I don't like setting up the gradient maps over and over for different settings, so I use the motion blur a lot more than the gradient maps on this. Okay, at this point, we would save this file. This is our Photoshop file. And we would then collapse this down so that we can get to our normal map. But make sure you save the Photoshop file, because changing it to a normal map is going to destroy this information. Now we go to Filter, NVIDIA Tools, Normal Map Filter. And let's talk about this window a little bit. Now, we've got a couple things going on here. This is where you set your height, and I've got it at 16. I'm going to knock it back to 12, so it's not quite so deep. Think of this as a pixel depth, and that's how many pixels deep you're making it. The higher the number, the deeper the normal map will look. I try to stick somewhere between about 8 and 18. And over here, the biased RGB is a tangent space. The max RGB is a local space. Now, both of them are going to require some settings of max to get them right. But if you need tangent-based maps, I'd use the biased RGB. If you need local-based maps, use the max RGB. The rest of these I don't use too much except for normalize only, and we'll go over that later. And I'm going to hit OK. I'm making a tangent-based map now. Now the tangent-based maps tend to look kind of flip-flopped. They don't look quite right. So I'm going to save this one. And I've already made a map, but I would save it at this point. And then if you want, you could go back in here, opening up your Photoshop file again. You can't make a normal map from a normal map. But opening up your Photoshop file again, you can make a local based map as well. And that's what I'm going to show you now over in Max. Okay, here we are in Max. Let me get this set up properly. This was set up for the scene before it. And here is our map that we've made. I've got one direct light in the scene, and the map that we're looking at right now is the I believe this is the local base map. Yeah, this is the local base map, and you can see that if I render it at the default settings, it's going to look inverted. And that's because in Max, I need to set this setting down here as local. So remember when we kicked this out of NVIDIA, the local-based map and the tangent-based map were two different settings. The default in Max is tangent. So if you want a local map, you need to click Local XYZ, and that's going to flip-flop your normal map so that it's correct. Now if we jump over here to the tangent-based map, I'm going to turn off my diffuse layer for a second in here. I'm going to drag this map over, and you can see here I have the setting at tangent. And so if I render this, I get a tangent-based map. Now this one has specularity on it, so you can see the difference between something with specularity and doesn't have specularity. But this is correct, and I'm going to put my diffuse map back on it so you can see what it would really look like. And that's a tangent-based map with some specularity on it and the tangent local settings set correctly. So when you're kicking them out of NVIDIA, you're really going to need to pay attention to whether you want local-based or tangent-based. If you're not sure which one you want, just choose tangent space for the time being. That will work for most of your needs. And anything in our class, you can probably use tangent space maps and be fine.